The answer to the question of which Chinese language course you should choose is that it depends. But what does it depend on, and how can you make the right decision about which course to take? Hello and welcome to the Hacking Chinese podcast. In this week's episode, we are going to talk about courses. And more specifically, I'm going to try to help you answer the question of which course you should take. This is one of the most common questions I receive from students, not necessarily in its most general form, just which course should I take, but perhaps should I take this course or is that course the best one for me? The only correct and short answer to questions like these is that it depends. Now, I realize that it depends is not a very helpful answer, so in this episode we're going to discuss what it depends on. I have only studied Mandarin at around 8 different schools or institutions, and even if you went to the same institutions as I did, your experience might be very different from mine. This is because it matters greatly which teacher you get, what level you are on, who your classmates are, and how much time has elapsed since I studied there. So this is why I don't want to give specific advice, as in recommending specific programs, because I simply don't think that's fair or even possible. I mean, yes, I could name courses you should try out, but if these actually are better than other courses for you specifically is impossible for me to know. So, as I usually do on Hacking Chinese, I want you to take control of your own learning and make your own decisions, and I'm here to support those decisions and help you make the right choices. So the first piece of advice is know yourself. And as the inscription at Delphi reminds us, it's important to reflect and be aware of our own situation before seeking advice from somebody else, including me. So here are a few things it might be helpful to clear up before you think about which course to take. First, why are you learning Chinese? Do you mainly care about speaking with family, or maybe passing an exam, or perhaps working in Chinese? Depending on what your goal is, a course might or might not be suitable for you. Second, how much time do you have? There's a big difference between full-time studying and part-time studying while doing many other things, and some courses might be great but might also require more time than you have available. And here the course difficulty is important. If you're short on time, don't dive into a difficult course where you will have to preview and review a lot. Instead, choose something easier. Whereas if you do have a lot of time, taking a more difficult course can be the right move. Third, how much money can or are you willing to invest? This affects whether you can consider full-time studying abroad, for example, or more intensive courses with one-on-one tutoring. And while it's not the case that money will always buy you quality, paying more usually means getting more in return. For example, if you compare different institutions that have group lessons and one costs significantly more than the others, it's not unreasonable to think that the more expensive one has fewer students per group, which generally works in your favor. Fourth, what is your current level? And this is of course something you are aware of yourself, but I'm bringing it up here because beginners, intermediate and advanced students need different kinds of structure and different kinds of support. The fifth and final question is where you can reasonably go to study. I already mentioned this in the money question, but are you willing to relocate abroad to China, for example, to study Chinese? This clearly gives you different options compared to staying at home and studying online. So the goal here is not to be obnoxious and ask a lot of questions before I actually give any concrete advice. It is instead to highlight that you yourself need to be aware of what types of courses you're looking for and why. And if you don't know yourself, your own learning situation, preferences and so on, this will be almost impossible. If you don't know what you want and need, how are other people supposed to give you good advice about it? Before we continue and consider which course you should take, I think it's worth considering whether or not you should take a course at all. The answer here again is that it depends, particularly on some of the questions I asked earlier. It also depends on your personality. Some people want a lot of support and guidance, and then I think taking a course is a great idea. But if you're an experienced language learner and you think you know what you're doing, you might not need a course. However, I think most students would benefit from going to class. It provides a framework and gives structure to your learning in a way that is difficult to do on your own. Naturally, just because you're enrolled in a course, it doesn't mean that you can relax and assume that the course will feed you everything you need. You still need to be active on your own, but enrolling in a course, especially as a beginner, means that somebody else has already answered a lot of questions that you otherwise need to answer immediately, such as which learning materials to use, how to learn, what to do next, etc. These choices are important, but as a beginner, you are not in a good position to answer them, and it will take a lot of time and energy that you could have spent just learning Chinese instead. So here are a few things you can ask yourself. How much external structure and pressure do I need to keep going? How comfortable am I with finding and evaluating learning materials on my own? How much live interaction with a teacher or students do I want or need? How much effort do I want to spend on planning and organizing my studies? As before, I can't really say if you in particular need a course or not. I mean, ultimately, if you think you need to take a course, perhaps because you need the support, structure, or discipline, then you probably should take a course. If you don't think you need a course, then you probably don't. Assuming now that you want to take a course, the next step is to think about what kind of course this should be, because there are of course many different types that will appeal to different students. Is the course full-time or part-time? And if it's part-time, how much time are you expected to spend? Is it a formal course at a university that will give you credits, or is it a more informal one? Is it aimed at individuals, small groups, or big groups? Does it contain any kind of one-on-one tutoring or more personal support? Another key decision that we talked about earlier is where you're going to study. Going abroad can be very powerful if you can do it, but it is of course perfectly possible to learn Mandarin to a very advanced level without leaving home. Going abroad though tends to give you more exposure to Chinese outside class. You don't really need to make an effort to hear and see Chinese all around you, whereas if you do this in your home country, you probably need to create this immersion environment on your own, and this is time-consuming and effortful. You also get more opportunities to speak and use the language for everyday interactions, which means you can convert what you've learned in the classroom more directly to communicative ability. Most people also think that it's more motivating to learn Chinese in a Chinese-speaking environment because everybody around you speaks Chinese, and so progress has a very real meaning. It allows you to function better in society compared to just passing exams or getting grades. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, living abroad gives you cultural immersion in a way that I think is simply not possible if you stay in your home country. Still, going abroad is not a magic bullet. You can stay abroad for years and use English most of the time and not learn any Chinese at all. Just because you have the opportunity to learn doesn't mean that everybody takes it. I would also like to argue the case that if you're a pure beginner, it helps learning some basics before you go abroad, simply because there are some things you might as well learn on your own, and the benefits of immersion doesn't really come until you understand a little bit at least of what's going on. Next, let's talk a little bit more about money, and then not just the money to not work and go abroad to study, but the actual money you pay for the course itself. Like I said earlier, expensive doesn't equal good, but I do think there are a few things that are worth paying for, so it's important when you pay or consider paying for a course what you are actually paying for. So here are a few things that I think are worth paying for. The first is fewer students per group. This is incredibly important if you feel that you need lessons to improve your communicative ability. Expensive schools usually offer you one-on-one tutoring of some kind and/or smaller groups, maybe 4 to 6 students in each. If you pay less, you might be in the same class as 15 or 50 other people, and that limits what you can get out of the lessons. It also helps to be aware of what you want out of the course itself. If you're after listening and reading ability, along with some structure, then a course with many students might be fine. But if you want to improve your pronunciation or speaking ability, having 20 classmates is not going to help. Next, expensive institutions often have more competent and experienced teachers. This is just a trend, and you can find excellent teachers in bad institutions or terrible teachers in good institutions too, and some teachers even work in more than one school, so it should be obvious that money isn't everything here. It's also not entirely clear what good means, and the people who hire teachers might have a different idea of what a good teacher is compared to what you think and what you need. For example, a teacher having the right degree might or might not be relevant for you as an individual, depending on what you're after. Finally, one of the more overlooked reasons to go to a more expensive institution is that your classmates will probably be more motivated. Again, this is not a hard rule. There are many people who have money but are still not very serious about learning, but these two tend to go together, and people who prioritize learning highly are usually also willing to pay a little bit more. Let's dig a little bit more into the problem of good teachers. As mentioned, it's not always easy to know if a teacher is good or not, but there are a few concrete things you can observe or ask students about, or if you have the chance to visit the school, you can check for yourself. Here are a few things that shouldn't take up too much class time. Learning basic definitions of words in the textbook. Reading the text aloud, unless sometimes and for the specific purpose of practicing reading aloud or pronunciation. Excessive listening or reading practice, unless specifically tailored to you. So for example, listening to your teacher speaking to you using language you know is very valuable. But if the teacher just puts on a podcast, you might as well do that at home on your own. You don't need a teacher to do that. And that is of course the reason to avoid the other things I mentioned as well. You might as well be doing them on your own, and you don't need to pay somebody else to do it for you. Instead, class time should be spent on things you really can't do on your own, so here are a few examples. Engaging with level-adjusted Mandarin in a communicative context. Practicing using the vocabulary and grammar you've learned. Getting feedback on your pronunciation, word choice, grammar, and so on. Asking questions that the textbook or dictionary can't answer. Practicing listening and speaking in interactive ways. For more about evaluating teachers, check out 7 characteristics of a great Chinese tutor or private teacher, which is podcast episode 255. So now that we have discussed a few criteria and a few things that your choice depends on, let's assume you have one or a few candidate courses. So here's a final checklist you can use to determine which of these to enroll in. First, what are my goals for learning Chinese, and does this course cover those needs? Does the course focus on what I want to learn, or are there parts of the curriculum that I'm simply not interested in? Second, is the course on the right level for me, both when it comes to proficiency and the time and effort required, and these are of course linked as we have discussed. Third, what am I purchasing here that I can't get access to elsewhere? Is there a better option for getting this rather than enrolling in this course, such as private tutoring perhaps? Fourth, who else is taking this course? Are they like me? Do they want the same thing? Are they on the same level of ambition? And if there is a mismatch, will this impact my learning in some way? And finally, how much am I committing to here? If I start this course and realize it's not for me, is there a graceful way out? What is the worst case scenario? It's time to wrap up this episode and answer the question which Chinese language course you should take. And as I said initially, the answer is that it depends. There is no single best course for everyone asking this question. In essence though, if you have time, energy and money to spend, go for a course with small groups and teachers who expect a lot from you, and private tutoring as needed. If you lack time, skip formal courses and go with private tutoring instead. If you lack money, choose a cheaper course and compensate with self-study. And if you lack the energy or motivation, choose whatever helps you stay on track. Thank you for tuning in to the Hacking Chinese podcast. If you like this episode, please share it. More information and inspiration about learning and teaching Chinese can be found at hackingchinese.com. See you in the next episode, and until then, good luck with your studies.